In the year 1263, on a quiet Majorcan island, a man named Ramón Lull faced a crisis that would test his faith in his humanity. Lull, a polymath and visionary, had dedicated his life to understanding and converting Muslims to Christianity. He was a man of many talents, poet, novelist, mystic, and tireless lobbyist for his causes. But his path was not without its dark moments. Lull had decided to learn Arabic to better communicate with the Muslim world. He bought a slave from Majorca to teach him. The slave, a man of great knowledge and a patient teacher, became essential to Lull's studies. For 9 years, they worked together, the slave imparting his wisdom and Lull absorbing it with a fervent dedication. One day, a shocking event shattered the peace. Someone overheard the slave speaking blasphemously about Christ. Lull, a devout Christian, was furious. In a fit of rage, he beat the slave, striking him across the face. The slave, nursing his wounds and harboring deep resentment, saw an opportunity for revenge. He secretly obtained a sword and, in the dead of night, crept into Lull's chambers. With a swift and determined hand, he tried to kill his master. Lull barely escaped with his life. The attack left him with a severe wound in his stomach, but he managed to survive. The slave was quickly captured and thrown into prison. Lull was left with an agonizing dilemma. What should he do with the man who had both taught him and tried to end his life? For days, Lull wrestled with his conscience. He couldn't bring himself to have the slave executed, for he was grateful for his teachings. Yet he also feared that the slave might try to harm him again. Desperate for guidance, Lull retreated to a nearby monastery and spent 3 days praying for a solution, but no divine answer came. On his way back home, Lull learned that the slave had hanged himself in his cell. Lull felt a strange sense of relief. He gave thanks to God, believing that he had been spared a difficult decision, and that his hands were clean of the slave's death. It was a haunting end to a chapter of his life, one that would forever haunt his conscience. By the mid-13th century, most of the Iberian Peninsula had fallen under the rule of Christian kings. But one small Muslim principality, the Amirate of Granada, continued to stand strong. Founded by Muhammad ibn Yusuf ibn Nasser in 1237, the Amirate was a wedge of land stretching from the Mediterranean coast to the Straits of Gibraltar. Despite its small size, Granada was a resilient and complex state. The Amirate's survival was a testament to its strategic location and the skill of its rulers. In 1246, Muhammad of Granada surrendered the city of Jaén to Ferdinand III of Castile and became his vassal. He agreed to pay an annual tribute, which was a significant burden for the Amirate. This relationship, though contentious, allowed Granada to maintain its independence for over 2.5 centuries. Economically, Granada was weak. The land was mostly rugged and poor, making it difficult to grow enough food to sustain the population. Cereals and olive oil had to be imported from the Maghreb, while Granada exported specialized crops like sugar, raisins, figs, and almonds. The renowned Granada silk was a major export, and much of the trade was conducted by Genoese merchants. The Amirate was also politically fragmented. It was a loose federation of tribes and lineages, each with its own local bosses. The emirs had to navigate a complex web of alliances and rivalries to maintain control. This made their role both difficult and dangerous. Despite these challenges, the early Nasrid rulers managed to keep the Amirate stable until around 1400, when internal strife began to tear it apart. The Alhambra, the citadel and palace complex of the Nasrid rulers, stands as a testament to the artistic and architectural achievements of Granada. Built on a rocky spur of the Sierra Nevada, the Alhambra was more than just a royal residence. It was a fortress, a government center, and a symbol of the Amirate's power and culture. The reign of Muhammad V, 1354 to 59, 1362 to 91, saw the Alhambra reach its final and most magnificent form. The palace's private apartments and courtyards are a unique and breathtaking example of Islamic architecture. The use of light and shadow, water, and intricate stucco work create a sense of harmony and beauty that has captivated visitors for centuries. One of the most famous courtyards is the Patio de los Arains, where water reflects the columns and arches, creating a mesmerizing effect. The Sala de las Dos Hermanas, with its honeycomb ceiling, is a marvel of engineering and artistry. The Alhambra's beauty was not lost on its contemporaries. Poets like Ibn Zemrak wrote eloquently about its splendor, comparing it to a bride adorned with the natural beauty of the surrounding landscape. The Alhambra is more than just a palace. It is a living testament to the complex and often troubled history of the Amirate of Granada. It stands as a reminder of the ingenuity and resilience of a people who, against all odds, created a civilization of enduring beauty and significance. In the heart of the Alhambra, in a room called the Sala de los Reyes, there is a ceiling decorated with frescoes. These paintings were not created by Muslim artists, but by someone from a Western Christian tradition. This shows that the Nasrid rulers, the Muslim leaders of Granada, were open to working with artists from different backgrounds. This openness went both ways. For example, Pedro I of Castile, a Christian king, rebuilt the Alcazar fortress in Seville in the 1360s and hired Granadan artists and craftsmen to do the work. Even Samuel Halevi, Pedro's Jewish treasurer, used these artists to build a synagogue in Toledo called the Sinagoga del Transito. Not only artists and craftsmen moved between the Muslim and Christian territories. Sometimes, people were forced to move because of wars and raids. Ibn al-Khatib, a historian, wrote that Christian captives were used to build parts of the Alhambra. Ibn Battuta, a famous traveler, saw a slave raid on the coast between Marbella and Malaga in the 1350s. To prevent conflicts, special judges called alcaldes intra-cristianos, why Moros were appointed to handle issues between Christians and Muslims. There were also alfaquecs, who helped arrange the release of captives, and rastreros, who acted as frontier police. Life on the frontier was full of tension and opportunity. This is reflected in the romances fronterizos or frontier ballads, which often told stories of noblemen and knights. One famous ballad, Morema, tells the story of a beautiful Moorish girl who was tricked and raped by a Christian man. The ballad shows how dangerous and unpredictable life could be for people living along the border. In the early 1400s, peace between Castile and Granada was broken. The Castilians, led by Infant Fernando, captured the strategic town of Antequera in 1410. After this, the relationship between the two powers returned to an uneasy peace, but Granada's position was weakening. The Marinid dynasty in Morocco, which had been a source of support for Granada, was weakened, and no strong successor emerged. Granada turned to the Mamluk rulers of Egypt for help, but they were too busy with their own problems to assist. By 1415, the Portuguese captured Ceuta, giving Christians control of the Straits of Gibraltar. Internal conflicts and a struggling economy further weakened Granada. The Genoese merchants, like the Spinola family, gained control over Granada's fruit exports, which hurt the local economy. The Valencians and Portuguese also started producing ceramics, competing with Granada's traditional exports. Despite these challenges, Granada continued to pay high taxes for defense and tribute, which made the rulers unpopular. The fall of Granada to Christian forces was inevitable. In 1474, Fernando of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, who had been married since 1469, became the rulers of their respective kingdoms. This marked the first time in nearly 800 years that a single authority governed most of the Iberian Peninsula. In 1453, the Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople, which increased the desire among Christians to strike a blow against Islam elsewhere. This, combined with the spread of printed books and the influence of humanist scholars, fueled the idea of a new crusade. The war for Granada began in 1481 with a frontier incident. Despite Granada's weaknesses, Castile had superior manpower, artillery, and leadership. In 1483, the Castilians captured Boabdil, the son of the reigning emir, and set him up as a puppet ruler. Castile's strategy of systematic destruction and sieges was successful. Major cities like Ronda, Loja, Malaga, Baza, and Almeria fell one by one. Granada itself was besieged in 1491, and the city surrendered in December of that year. On January 1, 1492, Castilian troops entered the Alhambra, and the next day, Boabdil handed over the keys of the city to Fernando and Isabel. Christopher Columbus, who was seeking support for his voyage, was present at the ceremony. After the conquest, Fernando and Isabel granted the Muslims of Granada the right to practice their faith and maintain their customs. However, the treatment varied. Malaga, which resisted strongly, saw most of its Muslim inhabitants sold into slavery. The city of Granada was treated more leniently, and Boabdil was given a small principality in the Alpujarras. In 1493, Boabdil chose to move to Morocco, where he lived until his death in Fez in 1532. Many Muslims chose to leave Granada, but those who stayed faced increasing pressure to convert. The two key figures in the administration of Granada were the Conde de Tendilla, the governor, and Hernando de Talavera, the archbishop. Talavera was known for his kindness and understanding. He tried to encourage conversion through education and understanding, even having Christian texts translated into Arabic. However, in 1499, the Catholic monarchs visited Granada with Francisco Ximenes de Cisneros, a more zealous archbishop. Cisneros overrode Talavera's policies and enforced mass baptisms. By 1500, all mosques in Granada had been converted into churches. This led to rebellion in the Alpujarras and other parts of the former amirate. The rebellion was crushed in 1500 and 1501. Muslims were given the choice between emigration or conversion, but emigration was difficult and expensive, so most chose to convert. In 1525, even the Muslims of Aragon were forced to convert or leave. Despite the conversions, the Moriscos, as they were called, remained a separate and often persecuted group. They outwardly followed Christian practices, but secretly maintained their Islamic faith. They had different customs, names, and even homes. The Inquisition struggled to control them, and many continued to practice their faith in secret. This hidden resistance shows that the forced conversions did not truly integrate the Moriscos into Spanish society. The story of Moorish Spain is a tale of beauty, complexity, and ultimately, tragedy. For centuries, the lands of Al-Andalus were a melting pot of cultures, where Muslims, Christians, and Jews coexisted, sometimes in harmony and sometimes in conflict. The period brought forth remarkable achievements in art, science, and literature, but it also saw dark moments of violence and persecution. When the Moriscos, the Muslim converts to Christianity, were allowed to live in peace after 1525, it seemed like a period of relative calm. However, tensions began to rise in the 1550s and 1560s. Spain was positioning itself as a defender of the Catholic faith, and the presence of the Moriscos, who were suspected of sympathizing with the Ottoman Turks, became a source of embarrassment. Economic hardships, such as the decline of the Granada silk industry and attempts to suppress Moorish customs, only added fuel to the fire. In 1568, the Moriscos revolted in a conflict known as the Second Revolt of the Alpujarras. The rebellion was brutally crushed by Don John of Austria, and in the aftermath, the Moriscos were forcibly resettled across Castile to break up their concentrated communities. Despite these efforts, the Morisco problem persisted. In the early 17th century, King Philip III, on the advice of the Duke of Lerma, decided to expel all Moriscos from Spain. Between 1609 and 1614, around 300,000 people were forced to leave their homes. This was a massive loss for Spain, which had a population of about 8 million at the time. The Moriscos were known for their hard work and skills in various trades, and their expulsion had a devastating impact on the economy. Some of those expelled even joined the Corsairs of North Africa, continuing to fight against their former homeland. The expulsion of the Moriscos marked the end of a significant chapter in Spanish history, yet the legend of Moorish Spain lived on. Writers like al-Makari, who completed his history in the 1630s, remembered the lost cities of Al-Andalus with nostalgia, hoping for a return to Islamic rule. Even in the 19th century, Romantic authors like Washington Irving and Richard Ford painted a picture of Moorish Spain as a land of beauty, tolerance, and enlightenment. However, the reality was often far more complex and tumultuous. Historians like Stanley Lane Poole, writing in the late 19th century, perpetuated this romantic vision, describing Moorish Spain as a beacon of civilization. Yet, this rosy picture overlooks the many conflicts and injustices that were a part of daily life. The Mozarabs, Christians living under Muslim rule, often faced discrimination, and the treatment of religious minorities was far from ideal. The idea of a tolerant and enlightened society was more a dream than a reality. Despite the challenges and conflicts, Moorish Spain played a crucial role in the transmission of knowledge from the Islamic world to Europe. This exchange of ideas helped lay the foundation for the Renaissance and the scientific revolution. The Muslims of Al-Andalus were the donors, and the Christians of Europe were the eager recipient. However, the interaction was one-sided, as the Muslims showed little interest in the culture and ideas of their Christian neighbors. In the end, the religious and cultural history of the Iberian Peninsula in the Middle Ages is a story of missed opportunities and misunderstandings. Both Muslims and Christians, often driven by their own fears and prejudices, failed to build a lasting bridge of understanding. Yet, within this history, there are also moments of cooperation and shared achievements that remind us of the potential for human connection and progress. The legacy of Moorish Spain is a reminder that the past is often more complex and nuanced than our romantic visions might suggest. It is a story of beauty and brilliance, but also of struggle and loss. As we look back, we can learn from the successes and failures of this era, and perhaps find ways to build a more inclusive and understanding world today.